I never imagined that a family dinner could shatter my world so completely, but that night has seared itself into my memory like acid on paper. I still recall the murmur of pleasant conversation swirling around the dining table as I sat there, heart pounding with the sweet excitement of sharing life-changing news. I'd been waiting for this moment for months. Ever since I discovered I was pregnant, I had nurtured a dream of a small family that would be built on love, hope, and a fresh start. I'd rehearsed my announcement in my head countless times, imagining the joy on everyone's faces. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. The dinner had been a carefully orchestrated reunion of relatives, cousins I hadn't seen since childhood, aunts who always carried themselves with quiet dignity, and the ever-watchful eyes of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. I'd chosen the perfect moment. After dessert, when the clinking of cutlery had quieted and conversation softened, to reveal that I was expecting. With a trembling smile and a heart full of hope, I announced, "I'm pregnant." In that moment, I was both vulnerable and invincible, standing at the threshold of a new chapter in my life. Almost immediately, the atmosphere shifted. Across the table, my sister-in-law's eyes blazed with a fury I'd never seen before. Her voice, once warm and welcoming, now erupted in a tirade so raw and unrestrained that it sent shockwaves through every soul present. "How dare you flaunt your news like that?" she screamed, her words laced with venom. "After everything I've been through?" Her tone was accusatory, resentful, as if my announcement were an affront to her own suffering. I stared at her, dumbfounded, as she recounted the tragedies of her past, stories of miscarriages and heartbreak that she had kept locked away behind a stoic facade. Her words, though intended to wound, only filled me with an icy dread. I tried to speak, to explain that my joy wasn't meant to diminish her pain, but my voice faltered under the weight of her bitter grief. The room fell silent, every family member caught in the crossfire of her anger and my disbelief. I could see my mother-in-law's eyes narrow with disapproval, her lips pressed into a thin line as she observed the unfolding drama. That night, the seeds of betrayal were planted in the fertile soil of our family's secrets, and I would later learn that their roots ran deeper than I could ever have imagined. In the days that followed, the memory of that dinner tormented me. I replayed every moment in my head, my hopeful smile, her seething glare, the stunned silence that descended on us all. I began to see the undercurrents of tension that had long simmered beneath the surface of our family gatherings, details I had previously chosen to ignore. It wasn't simply that my sister-in-law was hurting, she was determined to weaponize her pain against me. I discovered that behind her outburst lay years of unresolved grief and a desperate need to control the narrative of her own suffering. I wondered if my joy had somehow minimized her pain, as if my good fortune were a betrayal of everything she'd lost. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Just a few days later, during another family gathering at my in-laws' home, my mother-in-law confronted me with a cold, calculated ultimatum. "You need to terminate this pregnancy," she said flatly, her eyes void of any maternal warmth. "It's the only way to protect our family from further disgrace." I was stunned into silence, unable to comprehend the depth of her cruelty. And then, as if that were not enough, I discovered that she had taken it upon herself to dispose of my medications. A deliberate, calculated move meant to force me into compliance with her twisted vision of a perfect family. I remember the moment I found my prescription bottle missing, replaced by an empty, mocking space on the shelf where my life-saving medication once sat. Panic surged through me as I realized the full extent of her betrayal. My medications were essential not only for my physical well-being, but for the stability of my fragile mind, as I battled the constant anxiety that came with the possibility of motherhood. The realization that my own family had conspired to control my destiny left me reeling with a mixture of anger and despair. I felt betrayed by those I had trusted implicitly, my own blood, the people who were supposed to support me in every way possible. Over the following weeks, I spiraled into a tumult of emotions. Anger burned like wildfire inside me, igniting every fiber of my being. I spent sleepless nights pacing my apartment, my thoughts a chaotic jumble of betrayal and hurt. The pain of being manipulated by those I loved was unbearable, yet it steeled my resolve. I knew I had two choices: crumble under the weight of their expectations, or rise above and reclaim control over my life. I chose the latter, and with each passing day, I transformed that searing pain into a burning desire for justice. I began to document every detail, the dinner, the scream, the confiscated medications, in a journal that became both my confessional and my blueprint for revenge. I scoured the internet for stories of others who had suffered similar betrayals, and I learned that I was not alone. Many had been silenced by those they loved, forced to bow down to unreasonable demands and cruel judgments. Their stories fueled my determination to not only stand up for myself, but to expose the toxic dynamics festering within our family. I would not be the one to forgive and forget. Forgiveness, in this case, was an insult to the pain I had endured, a betrayal of the very essence of my being. As the days turned into weeks, I meticulously planned my retaliation. I started by gathering evidence, text messages, voicemails, even subtle hints from casual conversations, everything that painted a vivid picture of my family's sinister intent. I reached out to old friends and distant relatives, piecing together a narrative that would ultimately reveal the true nature of their cruelty. Each piece of evidence was a stepping stone, a necessary ingredient in the recipe for the revenge that was brewing in the depths of my soul. I recall one particular evening when I sat alone in the dim light of my living room, the silence punctuated only by the steady hum of the refrigerator. I held my phone in trembling hands, scrolling through a series of messages from my sister-in-law. Her words, once filled with a veneer of concern, now dripped with passive-aggressive malice. I could see how she had twisted every conversation to suit her narrative, turning my joy into a personal affront. That night, as I reread her messages, my mind churned with a dark resolve. I would make her, and my mother-in-law, pay for the damage they had inflicted upon me. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness. The only outcome that could possibly restore my dignity was one where their true selves were exposed and I emerged victorious. In the weeks that followed, I began to execute my plan with the precision of a seasoned chess master. I arranged meetings under the guise of reconciliation, only to subtly steer the conversations toward the topic of family dynamics and personal boundaries. I made sure that every comment, every insinuation was recorded and preserved. I created a secure online blog where I anonymously shared my story with a community of strangers who had faced similar abuses. Their encouragement and shared experiences provided me with the strength to carry on, reinforcing my belief that the time for retribution was at hand. I had always been a patient person, but the betrayal by those closest to me had unleashed a side of me that I never knew existed, a side that was unyielding, relentless, and uncompromising. I began to use my newfound resolve to orchestrate a series of calculated moves that would slowly dismantle the facade of perfection that my family had constructed. I shared snippets of my story with influential figures in our community, people who could help amplify my voice and bring attention to the toxic environment that had long been hidden behind closed doors. I was meticulous in every step, ensuring that nothing could be traced back to me. The anonymity allowed me to speak truths that I had long kept hidden, and with every post, I felt a surge of liberation. The first crack in their carefully maintained image came during a regional family event, a charity fundraiser that our family had proudly supported for years. I managed to secure an invitation to speak about the importance of mental health and self-respect, a topic that was close to my heart given the betrayal I had suffered. When I took the stage, my voice was steady, yet every word carried the weight of my experiences. I recounted the story of that fateful dinner, the cruel words, and the calculated act of confiscating my medications. I made it clear that my pain was not an isolated incident, but a reflection of a much larger pattern of abuse. The audience was rapt, and soon enough, whispers of discontent began to ripple through our community. I had exposed the rotten underbelly of a family that prided itself on appearances. My mother-in-law's reaction was swift and unforgiving. In private, I learned that she had tried to discredit my story by enlisting the help of influential community members to cast doubt on my credibility. But for every attempt she made to smear my name, I had an even stronger counter. I released a detailed report, complete with documented evidence and testimonies from others who had suffered at her hands. The backlash was fierce, and suddenly, the once revered matriarch was forced to confront the reality of her actions. The power dynamics within our family began to shift dramatically, and I could see the cracks in their unified front widening with each passing day. There were moments when I was tempted to lash out physically, to confront them in a blaze of anger that would end all disputes in one fell swoop. But I knew that true revenge wasn't about impulsive violence. It was about reclaiming my power and forcing them to face the consequences of their cruelty. I made sure that every move was calculated, every action a deliberate step toward exposing the hypocrisy that had defined our family for far too long. I became a ghost in their midst, working behind the scenes to dismantle the carefully constructed image they had presented to the world. The final act of retribution came on a cool autumn evening when the entire extended family had gathered for what was supposed to be a celebratory reunion. I had been invited under the guise of reconciliation, a chance to finally mend broken ties. Little did they know that I had orchestrated this event as the stage for my ultimate revelation. As the evening progressed, I casually brought up the events of that disastrous dinner, watching as panic and guilt began to ripple through the crowd. I revealed the detailed documentation of their manipulations, the conversations, the hidden messages, all laid bare for everyone to see. I could feel the weight of every secret and every betrayal lifting off my shoulders as I spoke with a calm intensity that belied the storm raging inside me. My sister-in-law, unable to contain her fury, lunged at me in a desperate attempt to silence my revelations. But I was prepared. I had recorded every word of her tirade, every attempt to deflect responsibility, and I broadcasted it live to our online community. The public exposure was complete, and there was no hiding behind the mask of a perfect family anymore. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. I had turned the tables, transforming my pain into a weapon that cut through the lies and deceptions of those who had once held power over me. I stood there, unyielding and resolute, as the realization dawned on everyone that forgiveness was not an option. I had been betrayed by those I trusted most, and I made it abundantly clear that there would be no absolution for their sins. The revenge was as meticulously executed as it was inevitable, a testament to the strength that comes from reclaiming one's identity in the face of relentless cruelty. With every word I uttered, I dismantled the illusion of familial harmony, exposing the rot that had festered behind closed doors for far too long. In the weeks and months that followed, the repercussions of that fateful reunion rippled through our community. Former allies of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law began distancing themselves, unable to reconcile the idealized image they once held with the harsh truths I had unveiled. I received messages from strangers, people who thanked me for having the courage to speak out, for shining a light on the abuse that had gone unnoticed for so long. Each message was a balm for my wounded soul, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, truth and justice could prevail. I have learned that revenge is not a fleeting act of anger, but a deliberate reclamation of one's power and dignity. I will never forgive the betrayal inflicted upon me by those who claim to be family, for forgiveness in this instance would have been a concession to the cruelty they embodied. Instead, I chose to rise above their manipulations, to let my voice be heard so that no one else would fall victim to their toxic influence. I forged a path forward that was defined by resilience, self-respect, and an unbreakable resolve to never let my light be dimmed by the shadows of betrayal. Now, as I stand on the threshold of a new chapter in my life, one where I am not only a mother-to-be, but also a survivor of emotional tyranny, I reflect on the journey that brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the calculated cruelty of that family dinner and its aftermath have shaped me into a woman who refuses to be silenced or controlled by others. I have learned that true revenge lies not in the fleeting satisfaction of retribution, but in the quiet triumph of reclaiming one's identity and forging a future free from the chains of past abuses. I share my story not to dwell on the bitterness of betrayal, but to serve as a beacon for anyone who has been hurt by those they trusted. It is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, we have the power to transform our pain into a force for change. I have seen firsthand the destructive power of manipulation and cruelty, and I have emerged from that crucible stronger, wiser, and unyielding in my resolve to protect my own happiness and that of my unborn child. Looking back on that harrowing night and the subsequent battles I fought within the confines of my own heart, I recognize that the journey was as painful as it was necessary. I learned that in the face of betrayal, forgiveness is a luxury that can sometimes feel like a betrayal to oneself. My revenge was not a mindless act of violence or destruction. It was a calculated, deliberate strategy to reclaim my dignity and assert that I would no longer be the victim of my own family's cruelty. Today, I stand proud, not just as a future mother, but as a woman who has wrestled with the demons of betrayal and emerged victorious. The scars remain, each a testament to the wounds inflicted by those who once called themselves family, but they have become a part of my story, a reminder that I have the strength to overcome even the deepest betrayals. I will never allow anyone to diminish my joy, nor will I allow any one person to dictate the course of my life again. For every cruel word, for every calculated act of sabotage, I have returned 100-fold in the currency of self-respect and unyielding resolve. My story is a declaration that betrayal may shatter the illusions we hold dear, but it also forges a path to a stronger, more resolute self. And as I embrace the future, I do so with the knowledge that I have the power to shape my destiny on my own terms, no matter how bitter the betrayal, no matter how deep the wound. This is my truth, a story of hurt, resilience, and ultimately, the fierce satisfaction of reclaiming my life from the clutches of those who sought to control it. I will never forgive the transgressions of my family, for forgiveness in this case would have meant relinquishing the power that I fought so hard to reclaim. Instead, I choose to live a life defined by the choices I made in the aftermath, a life where every challenge met with courage becomes a stepping stone toward a future filled with hope, strength, and unwavering self-determination. In sharing these words, I hope that anyone who has been betrayed finds the strength to stand tall and fight back against injustice. The journey is long and the road treacherous, but the taste of reclaiming your power is sweeter than any fleeting moment of forgiveness ever could be. I am no longer a victim of circumstance or the machinations of a toxic family. I am a warrior, a survivor, and above all, a beacon for those who have yet to find their own voice in the face of betrayal. I carry these lessons with me every day as I prepare to welcome new life into a world that, despite its harsh betrayals, still holds endless promise. My child will grow up knowing that love must be nurtured, that strength is born of adversity, and that true justice is achieved not through forgiveness of the unforgivable, but through the quiet, resolute act of standing up for oneself and for the truth. And so, with every beat of my heart and every breath I take, I honor the journey that brought me here, a journey of pain, defiance, and ultimately, the sweet taste of revenge earned not by cruelty, but by the unyielding assertion of my own self-worth. I know that I will never be able to erase the past, but I will continue to build a future that reflects the strength I discovered within myself. The scars may remain, but they serve as reminders of how far I have come and of the cost of betrayal that will never be forgiven. I am free, unburdened by the toxic expectations and manipulations of those who once held power over me. And in that freedom, I find the true meaning of victory. Every day, as I look into the mirror and see the woman who has fought through the darkest moments of her life, I know that I have achieved something far greater than mere revenge. I have reclaimed my life, rewritten my story, and in doing so, sent a clear message to anyone who would dare betray the trust and love of family. There will be no forgiveness, only the unyielding pursuit of justice and the sweet satisfaction of standing tall in the aftermath of betrayal. My story is complete, and though the wounds may never fully heal, they have given me the strength to rebuild and to cherish every moment of joy that now fills my life. I share these words as both a catharsis and a declaration, a reminder that even when those you love try to destroy you, you have the power to rise, to exact your own form of retribution, and to create a life that is unequivocally your own. And so, as I prepare to welcome my child into a world where I will always be the master of my own destiny, I do so with pride in the knowledge that I fought, I suffered, and I ultimately triumphed over the cruelty of betrayal. There is no forgiveness for those who sought to control me, only the resolute, unyielding satisfaction of having reclaimed my life, word for word, breath for breath. This is my revenge, my triumph, and the irrevocable declaration that I will never allow anyone to dictate the course of my existence again.